So if you bought a house at the height of the market and you get caught up in the property bubble, not good news for you this morning. You're probably going to have to wait 10 years to get your money back. This is what one of Northern Ireland's chief economists is saying. He's basically saying it'll take a decade for house prices to recover from the crash. He's the man at the PwC. We're looking to hear from you this morning in terms of your house buying and your house selling experiences. I've been fascinated with this over the last few weeks because I reckon, just anecdotally, just having a look through estate agents, that there seems to be more activity, that people, even just talking to me anecdotally, seem to have more of an interest now than what they did maybe in the past. And we'll have a look at some of the figures that have come out. The University of Ulster survey, it showed prices fell actually very slightly here in the second quarter of 2013 compared to the first. The university's quarterly house price index survey examined some 1,409 housing transactions. Let's look at some of these numbers. Average price of a house now, 130,864. Now that was compared to 131,128 in the previous quarter, so down just slightly. Morton Pinpoint in North Belfast, they're an estate agent. Colin Barkley works for them. Hello, Colin.
Morning, Stephen.
Morning. And the economist and wealth manager, it's your man again, Jonathan Davis. Good morning.
Good morning, Stephen.
Good morning. Colin, what's your feel of the market at the moment?
I think the market has definitely improved. There's much more activity, a lot more sales happening, and a lot more people out and about. I would slightly disagree with your opening where you said it was bad news for people who bought houses at the peak. I think for the first time in 6 or 7 years, there's at least a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel for people, and that they can sort of see that maybe the way ahead isn't as doom and gloom as some people had suggested. So yeah, 10 years is a long time, but at least if we're moving towards that slowly, then at least that's positive.
Well, we don't know if we're moving towards it slowly, and house prices went down in the last quarter.
They were static, I would say, Stephen. I mean, a couple of £100 over 130,000 is not a dramatic figure. I think that there's a general realisation or a general acceptance. I think that we've hit the bottom or as near as, and that's the first thing that had to happen before we could get some recovery on the road. But it is going to be a slow process. It's not going to be the bungee that hits the bottom and then springs way back up again.
Are you aware of people just being stuck, that they can't afford to move? They're just about scraping by, paying a huge mortgage because they got sucked into all of this. Yeah, and I mean, I've always said that the young couples who bought at the peak of the market, I feel sorry for them because they bought for all the right reasons. They thought, God, if we don't buy a house now, we'll never get a house. Some of the investors who got their fingers burnt, well, I'm sorry, things go up, things go down, and that's the way of the world. Pity you didn't tell them at the time.
Did it for all the right reasons.
Well, these investors were a lot of the lifeblood, presumably, for estate agents like you at the time. Don't be just knocking them willy-nilly.
No, they bought an awful lot of houses. There's no question of that. But again, whether that was creating a healthy market, we would all have known that it wasn't, and it wasn't sustainable.
Jonathan? A decade to recover, says Esmond Burney from PwC.
Yeah, I'm not actually convinced that it will be only a decade. Apart from anything, if it is a decade, that will require from a 50% or so fall in prices across Northern Ireland over about 5 or 6 years. That will require something like 6 or 7% per annum growth for the next 10 years, compounded to achieve that. And over the next 10 years, we're going to see higher taxes, lower public sector spending, probably incomes are going to remain lower than the general rate of price inflation. And on top of that, I think it's highly likely, I would almost put it as guaranteed, but you can't guarantee anything, that interest rates will be sharply higher at some point in the next 10 years than they are today. So there's major headwinds. I can't see how we're going to get 6 to 7% per annum growth for the next 10 years.
Yeah, what you've forgotten to tell us, of course, is that the new governor of the Bank of England, he's got a new strategy now in that he tends to he wants to tell people about the medium term. In other words, what the borrowing costs are likely to be in the medium term. And essentially, to cut the chase, he's essentially intimated that interest rates are likely to remain low for at least the next 2 to 3 years,
yes.
which will give people confidence to go out and buy at those low mortgage interest rates.
Yes, it'll suck more suckers in. And what you and the media are not saying is that the new Bank of England governor, Mark Carney, is not God. He's not all powerful. The global markets are infinitely more powerful than Mark Carney. And, you know, it's all very well Mark Carney saying he will not raise interest rates until, I tell you, he will raise interest rates when the global markets tell him to do so. And that will be far sooner than when he wants to.
It is a fair point, Colin Barkley, that if people are borrowing now at these low interest rates, if they're getting a 25-year mortgage, you know, there's no way they can't go much lower.
No, they can't. And in fairness, that's one of the things, has been one of the few saving graces over the last number of years, that the interest rates have stayed so low. I think if they'd gone up even slightly, it would have put even more people in a very difficult position. No. But I think most people look at it and say, well, if I know that I can budget for my mortgage today, and I'm fairly certain that there's going to be no rise in interest rates for the next 2 to 3 years, I'm comfortable with that. Hopefully my position will have improved over the next 2 to 3 years, if only slightly. So I can do that. If I push myself to the maximum today and the interest rate goes up next month, I'm in trouble. So I think 2 or 3 years, if there's a general feeling that it's not going to go up to then, I'm okay with that.
Is there much bidding on houses now, Colin?
Yeah, I think there is. There's bidding in many ways up to around the asking price rather than above the asking price. Above the asking price does happen, but still fairly irregularly. And I think the active end of the market is the lower end and up to around about the £150,000 region. And yes, there's a fair bit of activity, but bidding is still the exception rather than the rule, but it is happening more often.
So essentially what you're telling us is if there's an asking price with any estate agent, go in well below because people are bidding up to it.
I think most people over the last number of years, knowing that it has been a buyer's market, have been inclined to go in below the asking price, be it 5%, 10%. Some people have been sort of cheeky and put in silly offers, and some owners have been forced to take them. It's down to the owner's circumstances as much as anything else. But we're getting probably the asking price within 5% of it on most occasions now.
All right. Listen, thank you very much indeed. Morning to you both. 08459 555 678. The text 81771. The email